We're going to go ahead and get started.
Oh, good. That was good. Hello.
There's Bob.
Good afternoon, and I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our listening session. This listening session is on the topic of education. And education clearly and obviously is very near and dear to my heart, since that is what I have spent the last 28 years of my life, professional life, involved in. But it is important from a standpoint of equity, in that I believe that in order for us to address all of the other issues that surround equity, one is probably the one that is most interrelated to everything else. Because when an individual aspires for a certain type of job, oftentimes it's education that inhibits them. Likewise, when we visit our criminal justice system and go to any correction center across this country, oftentimes those who are mired in those institutions are there in large part because of a lack of education. And this goes across the board in healthcare, et cetera. So it's important that we find suitable ways to talk about equity in education. And before we get into our presenters this morning, I wanted to say to everyone that after you join the meeting, a technician obviously will enable your ability to use your microphone and your webcam. So you will have control of your own microphone and your own webcam, unless for some reason one of the facilitators or myself, I'm labeled as a facilitator, feels compelled to mute your mic, but we will try to avoid that. But we want you to be, respectful, and I'll allow the facilitators to discuss their ground rules, etc. Participants using mobile devices for this meeting will not be able to use their device as a camera. They can speak, but you can't use it as a camera. We ask that you use the raise hand feature when you desire to speak. That is a feature in the right-hand corner of your box. And that way you can be called upon to speak. Requests to speak are automatically prioritized by the meeting software when the raise hand feature is used. So it'll prioritize your request according to the time that you raise your hand. A meeting technician will unmute your microphones at the appropriate time to allow participants to speak. If you have any questions during our session, we ask that you contact us at equityiinitiative@codb.us.
Virtual meeting.
And you can send us an email or all sorts of correspondence to that email address, much of which I will explain at the end of the meeting that I will share with our group, our larger group. Now, we had a dynamic discussion this morning led by our facilitator who is joining us again, Teresa Rand, and it was an excellent conversation on media and business. This afternoon, we're discussing business and media, but before we do that, I want to talk about equity and how it contrasts or compares to equality. So if staff will go ahead and put the illustration up so that everyone can see our illustration that was shared with me by one of our participants this morning. And this is an illustration that I've seen before. I actually had a photo of it in my phone, and I'm sure many of you have seen it as well. I dare not try and define equity for anyone. I realize that it has a textbook definition and there are ways to define it, but I think a part of our discussion should lead us to a broader individual definition of what equity means to us and what it should look like. But I did want to share this illustration with you all because there is a difference between, and there's a reason that I chose the word equity. for this summit. I didn't choose equality, although I would be happy if we could get to a point in our society where we treated everyone equally. But we are not at that point. But I chose equity because I do believe that equity is an intentional goal. In order for it to be achieved, we have to be intentional about it. And a part of intentionality is first a transparent discussion and an open and honest dialogue about where we are. But also a part of that intentionality means that all of us, we come to the table with different needs. And equity that's intentional recognizes what's needed. And it aspires to address the need that an individual has so that they can be on a level playing field, so that they can, as the picture illustrates, so that they can see the game, so that they can participate in the game. As we see in the picture, everyone has on the left-hand side, everyone has a stool to stand on that is even. It's the same stool, but they don't have the same experience because one needs more than the other two. The little fellow there needs more help. And so an equitable situation would be to give him what he needs so that he can participate in the game. The same would be said of a young lady, I used that illustration this morning, who wanted to be an engineer. Have a young lady who wants to be an engineer, we have to remove the barriers so that those things in her dreams can become true or reality, give her an opportunity. So that will remain there throughout our sessions, at least this session. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two panelists, or our two facilitators, neither of whom is a stranger to me. I've known both of them for many, 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 many years, and I hold them both in the very highest of esteem. And our first facilitator is Dr. Primrose Cameron, who has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctoral degree. She has worked and advocated for families in Volusia County for 2 decades and currently resides in West Volusia. She has a wealth of experience as a motivational speaker, life coach, master of ceremonies, a classroom teacher, professional development specialist. I know her from her years as a guidance counselor at Mainland High School, helping many young adults and their families along the way. As a motivational speaker, she's like no other. She genuinely cares. She is very adept at having open and honest conversations. And what I really like personally about her style is that she's both engaging, but most importantly, she doesn't let anyone off the hook. She holds everyone accountable to self-improvement. And that's what I want this session to really be about. We all need to look in the mirror, and she's very good at compelling us to do that. She creates opportunities and possibilities through Cameron Enterprises, such as fashion shows, image clinics, vision board parties, community seminars, grandparents raising grandchildren, group sessions, and team building seminars. Primrose shares her fruits of the spirit in a variety of platforms. Her talks are often of issues that matter most, but not limited to building relationships in the workplace. Dynamic presenter and facilitator, please welcome Dr. Primrose Cameron.
Thank you, guys.
And additionally, we have one of my most beloved. My wife says I have many most beloveds, but this one truly is one of my most beloved from my days as a classroom teacher. We have Josie Stump. Josie is a professional educator with a litany of experiences as a classroom teacher, coach. She served as a coach at Seabreeze High School, and I want to share this. This was after her years as a Buccaneer. As a student at Mainland High School, I had the great privilege of having her as one of my students in my psychology class. During that time, she was our lead majorette for Mainland High School. She was the captain of the majorette squad as a junior. Then as a senior, she was a feature twirler. This was after being a national champion. She took those skills and applied them during her tenure as a teacher at Seabreeze High School, where when she was a teacher at Seabreeze High School, some of the things that she did, Ms. Stump talked, I want to make sure I get this right. She taught a dance group rhythm and through exercise and movement. And the reason that that's important to me is because that was the style that she seemed to take her own life experiences and her style of learning and have a great skill at applying that in the classroom. She inspired students and inspires students to learn through rigorous instruction using music, movement, and a touch of magic. Now, the touch of magic is what I really enjoy, because she currently works as a 5th grade teacher at the Holly Hill School, which is where I work also. But Josie has a gift of taking her learning environment and transforming it into an experience. So when students walk into her classroom, it's not an out-of-body experience, but it is an emotional connection to learning like no other, because the classroom becomes their conduit for entering into the process of learning. So the classroom is a model of technology and engagement. And last but not least, I would like to share that Josie is our current reigning Volusia County Teacher of the Year. And she is the Teacher of the Year because of the dynamic, but it's more about her relationships. She is a master builder of relationships with children, and she loves what she does, and she is constantly seeking ways to become a better professional. So please join us in welcoming Volusia County Teacher of the Year and our facilitator for today, our co-facilitator, Ms. Josie Stump.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to remain engaged, but I'm going to turn over our session to our co-facilitators.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Mayor Henry. And thank you for everyone that is a part of this particular webinar. Just glad to have the opportunity to share one of the areas that I'm very passionate about in the field of education. And so I kind of want to further set the stage with the word that Mayor Henry mentioned, which is very dear to my heart, the word intentional. So I decided to be intentional about not only the way that I connected with others, but the way that I furthered discussions or made decisions, or even the friends that I keep, right? It became intentional that whatever I became a part of definitely signified the opportunity for equity to be on the forefront, and not be a topic that, and this is what I share with people all the time, a topic that we keep quiet, right? So if we don't mention it, maybe it doesn't really exist. If we don't mention the problem, if we don't say it out loud. And so this goes into Mayor Henry saying that I hold folks accountable, and that's because I'm intentional. Because if we're not held accountable, then there are more things that occur that shouldn't be. And I really and truly hold children dear to my heart. And so when we look at the field of education, we have the opportunity, as Josie has does and continues to do to truly inspire the minds of the next generation of leaders, right? And so if we're not giving them all that they should be receiving, then what we're saying is we're not preparing them for the future that will be their own. And so it's important that we create that platform. And so that's why this particular conversation is very important for me, and why I cannot wait, or I'm excited about hearing more from you as we move to actionable steps, right, into the next wave or turn. And so more than just having a conversation, and that's why I signed up, right, is when Mayor Henry and I spoke, it was more than just having a conversation. Because we can have conversations, we can talk about a lot of things, we can say what we don't like, what we do like, but if we're not ready for real change, then what do we do with the conversation that we had? And so I'm excited about the possibility of taking just a conversation and leading it into actionable steps. And so that's why I'm here today, in addition to all the other stuff that I've had the opportunity to be a part of. It truly is just in line with making sure that folks are treated well and put in positions that they can further in their own life. And so that's what I look forward to when we speak of children and what will happen next. Josie?
And I'm excited to be here because I have been very intentional about building equity within my classroom and with my students, and building relationships and knowing their needs and designing my education for my students that I have with me currently. I have not been intentional about reaching outside of the classroom. And that is where I'm new in this journey, and where I look at Primrose, and, you know, she called me yesterday on the phone. I'm like, she's calling about nervous in my stomach. But I want to grow in this area, and I want to have conversations about equity outside of the classroom with other teachers, with other professionals, with administrators on the county level. And so I'm filling myself all summer with knowledge and information, because it's my job to educate myself and to come to the table with knowledge to be able to have these conversations. So I have been really intentional about reading. I have attended many seminars and looking up information, knowing data, the truths. We're going to talk a little bit later about discipline and knowing what is really happening with discipline in our school systems. And I'm ready to have those conversations outside of my four walls. So if you're like me and this conversation is new to you, Primrose encouraged me earlier to be honest about that. This is where I am in this journey, and I'm ready to walk together to learn and grow together. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and that's truly where we are. And just thank you so much, Josie, for bringing all of your experience to this platform as well. And so, you know, this is a listening session. And so we wanted to pose 3 questions. We want to hear more from you. So I can't wait until I see maybe more videos of people. So that I can feel like, yay, we're really connecting. But if not, that's okay. Let's just keep our mics on. So that we can hear from you, because we would like to hear more about where you are in this work and what your thoughts are, whether you're an educator or not. It's very valuable to hear from the community as a whole. So the first question that we pose is, how does equity play a role in how our students are taught? Really like some other videos. That anyone can
I would
share.
love to have some join us.
So,
Hello?
oh, yeah.
Hi.
Hi, I'm just going to say hi. This is Jenny Nozick. I am a local self-employed environmental educator of sorts, and I try to show people their self-interest in protecting the environment and conserving resources. And this has a great deal of intersection with equity, because as we all know, communities of color are disproportionately affected by environmental problems. Also, with the systemic racism, and the loss of land stewardship, home ownership and land ownership among Black people and other people of color, there's just so many issues. And as far as the education, I've read and seen a lot of the connections. Where I see it up close and personal is that I run a little free library in my neighborhood and I put books out. And I really started to look specifically for books that had Black kids in them and had other kids of other ethnicities that were not white. And at first it was hard to find them. And now what I find is it's hard to keep them in stock. You know, I went to the Fresh Book Festival last year and bought a whole bunch of books, including some of Dr. Cameron's. Thank you, Primrose. I love your books. Those books, they go out into the community, and they oftentimes they never get returned. But I need to get more of them. I need to just be a funnel for these books, because the way that people get educated, anyone gets educated, is by having some relatable voice talk to them. And books saved my life. If I had tried to tell, it would be a very long story, but books basically were one of the things that saved my life, other than roaming around out in nature. And both of those are essentials of education. I feel like, and again, I feel like a lot of the communities, the Black communities and communities of color, get the short shrift. For example, if it's not safe for them to go walking out in their neighborhood, or if they don't have a good library. So yeah, so many conversations to have about this, and thank you all for having this.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know in the classroom, I started the journey as making sure I had Black characters in my books, but then it has evolved to making sure I am utilizing Black authors also. So my students are seeing Black members of the community are in leadership roles and further than just a character in a book as well. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that is something, definitely work we need to do in our school systems. When I ask students at the beginning of the year, I often survey students. One of the questions I ask is about their favorite character in a book. Oftentimes, no matter the racial color of a student, their favorite character is a white character. So that is something I am always working on in the classroom. Great point. Thank you.
So Jenny, what are some ways that you feel that the community can further assist?
Well, let's see. Maybe if there was is there some sort of, I wish the Fresh Book Festival was going on all year round. It's because there were so many books by African American authors, and they were for people of all ages. And actually, my library serves adults too, and I was able to buy books for adults. And
yeah, and I think that's in line with Mayor Henry's literacy initiative as well.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Okay. What if there was? Is there anyone who wants to set up an African American bookstore? Like, would there be? There must be someone in the community who'd want to set one up, and then how can we support that?
Okay.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
How about on Orange Avenue?
Yeah. How about it?
Okay. Also, hi, Mr. Presley. Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Any other views on how does equity play a role in how students are taught? And as
I have an answer.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Maggie Cotto. I'm a teacher in alternative education. I work at Riverview Learning Center, and I've been there for about 18 years. But when I was studying text and technology at UCF, I was introduced to a book called Stuck in the Shallow End, and it uses the metaphor of the segregation in the early half of the 20th century, keeping African Americans out of public pools and beaches, and how that that discrimination left like a residual history. And the author compares it to discrimination and segregation in schools that still exists today that we don't realize. So it has to do with scheduling students for honors courses, scheduling students for more intensive computer courses, math courses, and how oftentimes minority students get left behind. So I would recommend that book. I have it here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Now, is that a, have you done a book study with that book or with your colleagues?
It was a reading that I had to do in a technology course years ago, and I actually haven't read it since, but I pulled it off my shelf to reread because it always kind of stuck with me because the metaphor itself was really powerful. So maybe I could summarize it. Maybe we could have like a resource center where we could add quotes or links or, you know, book titles. That would be useful. And I'll see if I can, you know, maybe like whip up a quick summary and share that.
And be able to share it. And can I push the envelope a little more, Maggie?
Sure.
Don't mind? So I thought I'd ask first, right? So you mentioned there are some things that we don't necessarily realize are occurring, right? Like segregation, things that have occurred in the past, but maybe occurring in the present.
But there's, right, the argument of the book, and again, I haven't read it in years, but the argument is that there's this residual effect so that minority students are maybe subconsciously seen as maybe not capable of being in the tougher courses, or maybe, you know, white students or even just students who have wealthier families or families of more influence get better schedules because they don't want to upset those parents. It has to do with assumptions that teachers make about kids in their classroom without realizing that they're doing it. So it's kind of like how segregation still exists in schools overall, and then within classrooms as well, still today, that, you know, teachers and guidance counselors don't even realize they're committing.
That's a good point. Thank you. Any others?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi, this is Stephanie Henry.
Oh, hi, Stephanie.
Hey. I am currently the Dean of the College of Education at Bethune-Cookman, but I am also the creator of innovative programs, math and reading programs, actually the title, the Math Party and the Reading Party programs, where I travel the country training teachers and students to infuse exercise, music, and dance with their curriculum, math and reading curricula. And also, I am the author of the ABCs of Black History, and recently also Engage Us or Enrage Us. And so this topic is very near and to me, and I'm very passionate about it. It's Engage Us or Enrage Us. Schools make the difference. I believe that schools make the difference. And the story is about two boys, actually one is my son, who have so much in common. I mean, I'm just saying, actually they're related. They have a lot in common, with the exception of their school experiences. And so one student is treated a certain way because he comes from a certain socioeconomic background, I'll say, whereas the other is treated in more of a dismissive manner. However, they both have the potential to achieve. It's just about how the educator decides to push this student. Sometimes we overlook students who look a certain way, and who may behave a certain way, but these students have the potential to succeed just as much as the person who may have the parents who may be more involved and engaged. But I think that when it comes to equity, it's just very, very imperative that students are treated fairly when it comes to instruction. And to me, this means that instruction cannot be one size fit all type of situation, because I may not learn with the same teaching modality that this teacher is using for one student. I may need that music, or I may just need the lecture. So I just think that it's important that we do whatever it takes, rather this student, whatever it. In fact, when I taught 5th grade, I made it my business not to look into their files before they came to my class. That way they were on an equal playing field. And I feel the same way now when I see students. I didn't want to know, I didn't want to hear, I didn't go to the teacher's lounge so they can tell me about this student who's, oh, you're getting, of course, sometimes they still will let you know, whoa, you're getting Chris, because the whole school knew Chris. But I made sure that I treated all of them the same from day one. And I let them know that I believe in them. And I just believe that every student needs that. Now I can go on and on and on about equity and about instruction, but I will say it is definitely not a one size fit all type of situation.
So Stephanie, can I ask you the question of how can we support that push to ensure that our students are treated in such a manner?
Great question. I think that it begins with a conversation like we're having now. I think all the teachers in Volusia County, all the teachers everywhere, they all need to be included in a conversation such as this, because someone said earlier that sometimes we don't realize that we're treating a student a certain way or not treating a student a certain way. So I do believe that it begins with a conversation, whether it's with professional learning, or in fact, I thought about that, like maybe we should start that, Dr. Primrose. Out there and make sure that all students, have access to this conversation or are included in this conversation.
Primrose, can I ask a question?
Of course.
I don't have children in school any longer. It's been a long time. But what kind of education do the teachers get on equity, diversity, inclusion? Because I think, Josie, you said it, often they don't realize, they don't know what they don't know, similar to what you shared with us at the beginning, similar to Primrose knows my story, to getting from there to here, so to speak. But what kind of ongoing, if any, education are teachers given to be sure they're aware of what they don't know? Because we like to think they all have the best intentions, but that doesn't get us anywhere.
So let me share 2 things. So that's a very good question. And let me start maybe with Stephanie's and kind of go back. So definitely more is needed, right? In such as this. So even my child, who is now 25, right? Not the same population in which Josie is working with currently, right? And so even with those change in the needs, that means the professional development would need to have changed as well. Currently, the state is requiring for new teachers that come in brand new, they're leaving their programs, they're coming in, they have moved from 6 hours of cultural competence or diversity hours needed to 1, right? And so now you can check the box, it's just like class management, you check the box and you say, I've completed that. But even within that, it does not look like there are classrooms at hand, right? And so, I'm a firm believer, because I am pro public education, I'm pro educators, I'm all, that's always been me. So I feel everyone wakes up with positive intent, right? The issue that lies is the positive intent may be in line with equality versus equity, right? So I still have positive intent, it's just maybe not in the right place right now. And Maggie made a very good point. Sometimes we don't know, right? We just don't know. And so probably everyone that has raised children and their children have gone in schools, you probably have a story, right? Where someone didn't know. And we see situations where certain things were not handled in the best manner, right? But to answer your question, as far as professional development is concerned, the requirement, and Josie can help with what happens later, but for new teachers, I know that it's gone from 6 hours to 1.
And I don't think I've had that training since I started in 2000. This is what I've done for myself. And we need a space where we can have real, open, honest conversations like this today. And how I see it with a lot of teachers, they'll say, well, I have the same expectations for all students. Well, that's a set it and forget it mentality. We have to have high expectations where we are getting to know individual students and pulling them up. If we just set it and forget it, we think our intentions are good. We think we're meeting these expectations, but that's the difference between equality and equity. And I think there's a gap there in understanding.
And here's a further challenge, right? When we think about best standards or how we teach in our classroom, when we're checking boxes, it normally doesn't fall in line in equity, right? There's not making sure that, right, you treated everyone fairly. It's kind of assumed that this would happen, right? That this would occur. Am I correct, Maggie? Right? So this is something that everyone would assume. However, what we're learning more and more is that the situation remains, right? And if you have children that are a part of schools, not all the time are we meeting the mark. That doesn't mean it was intentional, right? But not all the time are we meeting the mark. And that's the difficulty in that. So, some of the notes that I'm taking now is we're thinking about actionable steps, because we want to make sure that's still a frame in our mind, is, what is it that we're able to do to better support our teachers? So it's not that Josie waited, right, until courses were set for her to take or be a part of in the area of professional development. She made a choice. But maybe her neighbor in the pod, right, doesn't know that those choices are available. So better support her as well, right? Because at the end of the day, these are our folks working intently with our students each and every day. So yeah, so very good points made. And Stephanie, to piggyback on your title, engage us or enrage us, I picture that as one of the sessions already, right? Of something that we really need to tackle or pursue. So thank you for that. Are there any other responses or comments in the area of how does equity play a role in how our students are taught? Or we will move into number 2.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Patricia
Can you hear me?
Boswell.
I heard 2 people, so let's hear Patricia first and then Lee second, please.
I'm sorry, Lee. So I just wanted to add to this conversation in terms of very often in public health, when we look at data, we talk about the outcomes, but I think when it comes to equity, what's really essential is what got us there. Why is that outcome or that benchmark or whatever it is we're measuring, why is it different from one group to another? And understanding why we got to where we got is, I think, very essential when you're doing this equity work. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you for that, Patricia. Lee?
I just wanted to say, as I heard everyone speaking, it was like drawing into my mind that I have never met 2 students who needed the exact same thing. And if our job is to meet their needs, then it will not look the same. It will not be equal. It will be equitable. And, even in a diverse population or a non-diverse population, I still have not met 2 kids that needed the exact same thing. And I think that's why teachers are so tired, because it's a lot of meeting people's needs where they're at. But it's not that difficult of a concept to consider that not everybody sitting in front of you needs the exact same thing. And I think that that's the case when we're looking at restorative and things like that too, how kids react to is so different and their needs are so different in that moment. In looking at students just as individuals instead of a cookie cutter, you know, this happened on this day and we just go to this line and we administer this according to. So I have a very small school, so obviously that's, you know, it's easier in a smaller school, I think, when you kind of personally know almost every student in the school. But I also wanted to say two other things with regard to the teachers. And then taking a step down, I think the thing that stresses me out sometimes is that how do we address the students' attitudes towards each other, even when, as a faculty and staff, we're all on the same page. We are, you know, 100%, you know, ready to go with this mission. And then how do we tamper the undercurrent that we will see in all of our schools of people who are not on board in their subversive ways that they will try to undo that good work? That's a complicated problem that keeps me awake at night. And then the other thing was when you asked how to help, I think this helps me in that I'm telling myself every day to be bolder as a leader, to speak louder as a leader, and having this conversation helps me remember to do that and feel safe and secure doing that when you know that everyone can be giving you a yes when you're face to face, but you know that there's undercurrents. That's why we're having this conversation, because there are undercurrents that are not on board with this. And it's almost in our nature not to upset anybody as school leaders. Like, you don't want to upset anybody, but I have to remind myself to be bold and not worry about upsetting people. So this helps get into my psyche and say, you know what? I have people who see this the same way I do, and I am going to be bold, and then convincing other people to be bold about it.
Good stuff.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
I am
talk that
right
long.
there with you.
Dahan?
I just want to piggyback on what Leah stated. It starts with the leaders on your campus. Starting with the principal and assistant principal, they have to be transparent and share some of the mistakes that we've made in the past and how we didn't go above and beyond for a student, and just to be honest and have those transparent conversations with your faculty and staff and what we need to do moving forward. Additionally, and speak about the importance of building relationships with all your students in your classrooms. In addition to what can we do extra? For instance, when we're working at Stark Elementary, a Title I school as well, and we had to have some honest conversation about the students who attended Stark, the neighborhoods they grew up in, their households, and what disadvantage they entered school. And when they entered in kindergarten, how many of the sight words they knew or didn't know compared to their peers from more fluid population. So we challenge teachers, including administrators, to tutor during the mornings, during lunch. We wrote a grant for an after-school program to provide more opportunities for those students to remain on campus to receive additional instruction versus going back home into those non-nurturing environments. So again, it starts with the leaders on your campus.
Thank you. And thank you, Lee, for your transparency as well. I appreciate it. Are there any other comments or further discussion in this area?
I'll say something. This is Jenny Nozick again. And as far as the physical learning environment, I had an experience where I was invited to a school to be part of an environmental event. And I mean, I haven't been in a school in a long time. I'm 58 years old, but this school, I was shocked. It looked like a prison to me. It looked like a prison. It looked like there was all these chain link fences dividing up the school. It did not look like a place that resembled any school of my childhood. And I had not been to any other schools enough to know that if that school was that way, because it was a lot of kids from the projects were there, or if all schools are getting that way. But it looked like it's not a good place to learn at all. And I mean, I know teachers are up against a lot these days, and I don't want to criticize any teachers or anything like that, but it seemed like the kids were being not talked to like human beings. They were just like, do this or else, do that or else. And I'm like, is this really what it's come to? And it didn't seem like a rich learning environment to me.
Well, this is Sue Odina, and I haven't said anything all day long, so it's pent up. But I'm a mother of 5, a grandmother of a dozen. And when I was a child, we lived on islands during the summertime. My mother went to Goodwill and got us a bag of bathing suits. That's what we wore all summer, and a bag of books. And we were taught books are our friends, you treat them right, etc. So we developed a love of reading. We have one child that when she was a baby, her life was in question, shall we say. It was a stressful thing, and we didn't expect anything of her. Just the fact that she was alive was terrific. So if she came home with C's, we were just as happy. The other ones, we expected all A pluses, but that one, we had no expectations for, just happy she was alive. And she's now got a master's degree like the rest of them. And she said, you know, she was fully aware that she was skating because of our expectation or lack of expectation for her. So I do understand that for other kids. My grandchildren want to know why I give them books for birthdays and holidays and Christmas and, you know, whenever. They have their iPads, they have all their social media, and so they don't value books the way I do. And it's definitely an issue. Anyway, I just had to add my 2 cents because I
No, appreciate it. Yeah, that's a very
Thank you
good,
for that transparency.
yeah, it gives a great visual. And so now we'll move into question 2. Josie?
Question number 2, how does equity play a role in how our students are disciplined? We want to open up the conversation about discipline. Is there anyone that wants to speak on that experience?
So I think I'll start, and I shared this, Teresa has heard this before, you know, being a mother of a 25-year-old son who hasn't always been 25, right? And just watching him grow within the school system, there were some things that I had to tell him as his voice changed or he got a little facial hair, right? And I had to, you know, reiterate the issue of respect and making sure that it doesn't sound like he's raising his voice or getting too close to anyone and having a conversation. But what occurred with him was something that I'll never forget, and it was very hurtful for me, something that I had to deal with. And being an educator is probably, for fellow educators on the line, you know how hard this is. You had a child in the school system where you have to show up, and you show up as the parent, right? And not as the fellow educator. And I'm mom all day. So I remember having a conversation. My son had gotten in trouble. He's more of the joke all day, talk too much person, like his mother. And so the conversation was around the teacher not liking how he said hello. I see eyes get open, right? So I'll put that out there. It's not that he didn't say hello. It's not that he yelled hello. It's not that it wasn't any of that. The conversation was around like how he said hello. I don't think he really means it. Right, so I was looking at a referral. Well, since we're talking about discipline, and I'll put that out there, right? So the referral was based on how he said hello. So when we talk about, right, and later as a guidance counselor, I pretty much, I get to interact with when those individuals have referrals and, you know, having further conversation, but sitting across from me had never been a child who was reprimanded for saying hello the wrong way. Right?
I have something to say. My name is Karen Delisle, and I'm here because I'm a member of Faith, you know, fighting against injustice toward harmony. And our youth committee took on looking at out-of-school suspensions. And to our surprise, we found that Black children were getting suspended 50% more than white children. And so that has become an issue of ours. And we were working with Dr. Hall with restorative practices and seeing the value of that and hoping that that program would continue. And another thing we've looked at is children who get arrested for childish behaviors, but then get an arrest record, which, you know, affects college, it affects scholarship, it affects military. So those were the things. And I'm an old person. My children are even old at this point. And when they went to school in Ormond Beach, Ormond Elementary, you know, Ormond Junior, school was to me, I was the perpetual PTA president, but it was a happy, joyful place. And it just breaks my heart what's going on to the young people, because my kids got good education here 25, 30 years ago. And I want that for today's children, and especially with the extra social burdens of lack of affordable housing and homelessness, and just go on and on. So I commend you doing this, and I'm a nurse, but I admire teachers too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So what are some ways that you feel the community can help with the initiatives that you've been working on through Faith in the area of discipline?
Well, when discipline, like I said, when Dr. Amy Hall was doing the restorative practices, we actually went through the training, and you know, as adults, and if, you know, a kid bopped another kid, you know, they did the circle up in the morning and then talked about what happened at your house this weekend. Oh, I had my birthday. Oh, my dad got arrested. Oh, we had to move out of our place. So it kind of built a compassionate environment for the children. And then later in the day, say if one bops the other, circle up again and ask the child that got hit, how did you feel when that happened? Oh, I was scared. And what were you thinking when you did that? And the information they slowly accumulate throughout, you know, the year, the school year, it really had dramatic results in reducing suspensions and punitive things with kids. And if this is a movement that's gone across the country, and we thought, well, wouldn't this be so much better than just bam, you're going to the office and getting suspended? And so we're involved with children, including the, you know, juvenile access center, you know, trying to keep kids out of these punitive situations that will haunt them the rest of their life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
You
I
are.
think that goes along with to the Engage Us or Enrage Us. I just took a workshop with Dr. Sean Woodley, and he had us think about anxiety and what are our reactions, how we express anxiety. And anger and anxiety have very similar actions. And so a lot of times when we think a student is acting out in an angry manner, they're acting out through anxiety and frustration, and we need to be aware of those things. So that was a perfect tie into that. Anybody else want to share about discipline and equity?
I'll share. Discipline is, for those who are administering discipline in schools, you have to be intentional and understand that very often students who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, their parents may or may not be as engaged with you as an administrator. And what I've noticed over the years in my own practice is that it is easier to suspend a child whose parent is not engaged than it is to suspend a child whose parent is engaged. So one of the things in another life that I'm going to work on is training administrators to take their role as in locus parentis seriously, more seriously than we sometimes do. And what I mean by that is that when a parent is absent and you're serving as an administrator or a teacher, we have to somehow intervene and serve as the parent, although we may be the one administering discipline or doing the teaching. We have to have both roles, because this child who comes from a low socioeconomic background, parent may not be able to be involved. Most times they care just as much, but they just tend to accept the consequences that the school provides because they value the school, they trust the school. But those who have come from a higher socioeconomic background realize that if they raise a lot of noise or a lot of saying, that the discipline for their child will be reduced. So we as administrators and school personnel have to always remember that when we're dealing with children. And it's something that has greatly impacted my role as a school leader when I started to really think about things and try to force myself to make certain that if this child's parent were calling me, would I still hold the line of discipline that I'm choosing to administer at this time? And that's it.
Good afternoon. This is Robin King. If I may, I don't have children. I never had the courage to do that. So bless those who do. You know, we operate youth programs for young adults who have dropped out of school. And one of the things that I see is this, the zero tolerance has caused such harm. You know, if we can't create teachable moments that as soon as someone has done anything inappropriate, and it's left too often maybe to some of the things I've heard you all say this afternoon, it's left up to the judgment maybe of someone who is caught up in the moment and is responding with anger. You know, if you think about when we were all younger, we probably did a lot of those things, but someone told us to stop doing that, and we had a second opportunity or a third opportunity, or at least someone who would talk to us and just, you know, have that conversation we all needed to have. And for that opportunity to just be removed completely. And you know, the story that I share is, you know, when I started working for this company for CareerSource, we ran a summer youth program, and I was called to one of the classrooms because we had a young person bring in a butterfly knife, you know, and I can't remember if he had taken it from a sibling or something, but I was called. I went and I took it from him, and I said, don't do that again. I still have that knife. As a reminder that we all do something stupid. It should not define the rest of their future. Because if that happened today, the police would be called, you know, it just gets out of hand so quickly. So anything that we can do for our students that invites a bit more forgiveness and tolerance and creating those teachable moments, I think would be beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And what a great explanation. I know when I was running CHAMPS classes, training teachers on CHAMPS, if a student is struggling to read, we teach. If they're struggling to do math, we teach. If they're struggling to behave, we need to teach as well. Great explanation. Anybody have any suggestions on how we can do this and move this into the classroom and into our schools? Abby. I think your mic is off. I'm sorry. No, we can't hear you. Oh no. I'm sorry.
You are unmuted. I'm not sure why we can't hear you, but you are unmuted.
Maybe if you have, I had to plug a headphone into my computer to make it work earlier when we tested it. So maybe if you have a headphone.
Okay, we'll come back.
Is there anyone else that would like to share about discipline?
I just wanted to add, I won't get all churchy as the non-public school teacher, but I always think about this with regard to discipline. I think it applies here too. One of my teachers used to say, if you're not sure what to do, to err on the side of the gospel. And I know I'm a high school principal. I've been played a few times by some kids that probably got one over on me. They looked more contrite than they really were. And I think you struggle with being tough. And I comes in is that we all need to be tough. And if we're really tough, then that will promote good behavior. But I think we all need to be comfortable with, I would rather have that opportunity for redemption for the child to grow than to be so harsh that the relationship is over. And there's no trust anymore or anything else. So something I think could apply in, secular and non-secular settings to just, when you're on that bubble of what to do, I think the kinder, gentler approach that allows for redemption is the path. And you might, like I said, you might get burned on it. That same kid can sometimes come right around and do the same thing the next day, and you realize you needed to be tougher with them. But at that point, I feel like you do have something in the bank with them to say, man, I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. Now we're going to go to the next thing. But it feels more personal.
Thank you. Stephanie? We can't hear you.
I'm not sure what a lot of folks are self-muting is what they're saying.
Yeah, but once it shows that it's not muted. So Abby's is muted, but Stephanie's isn't.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Probably because, hold on. Now I have an echo because I'm on 2
devices.
We got a 5-minute warning. 3 minutes.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I think that we have to first understand why the student is acting out before we determine how we're going to reprimand the student. Because some students are okay with teachers who have the propensity to send them to the office. In fact,
yeah.
And oftentimes it's not because they want to behave, it's because they don't know the content. They don't understand what it is that they're supposed to know. So please don't call on me. I can't read, so I'm going to out. Okay, don't call on me to answer this math problem because I don't know it. So I'm going to act out so that you can put me out. Okay, and so that's where equity in education comes. We have to be sure that all students are receiving the education that they need, and the instruction is diversified enough to reach students. That way the students are comfortable in class and they're not acting out in order to get out.
Yeah, definitely very good points. You know, I think back to Mayor Henry mentioned the fact of being an administrator and putting on, you know, we wear so many hats anyway, right? We're always changing them at any given point. Morning looks different than the afternoon. But in any role that you play, especially as an educator, you have the opportunity to put your feet in their shoes at any given point, right? And so the question then is, how intentional are we in educating today's youth? So how much do we think about how to act or react to situations that may arise? Because there are a lot of things that may occur and you say, well, this wouldn't happen in my house. Oh no, I need to write a referral. It's time, right? Why is this going on? And it's more of, but if I put my feet in that person's shoes, then what does it look like? How can I react to their basic needs in that way? So not coming from the same environment. We've spoken a lot about environments, right? And where individuals are from, whether or not they're bused in, or what's the population of our homes. If we get a call, someone mentioned that they're in healthcare. It's the same thing I often hear in healthcare, right? If you have someone in the nursing home, are they getting more calls from the families? Do they have more visitors? Right? The same thing in our schools. If you're not necessarily getting a call from that parent, are you going to reprimand the child in a different way, right? Because it's easier or time is of the essence? Or are we going to do what's fair and equitable for that person? No matter what the support system looks like, because at the end of the day, we are the support system, right? All of us being inclusive and involved. And that's really important. Then for some, what I've heard over the years, oftentimes, well, is I don't know what that feels or looks like, right? When I often share my life in raising my son, it doesn't look like another mother in raising her children, right? It may not be the same story, but just because it's not the same story does not mean we don't react or work towards what's best for that child, because it may not necessarily be your story. And so those are important as well. And Josie, you've had a lot of experience, Miss Teacher of the Year, right? And all the fabulous, I was able to witness all the fabulous things you do in your classroom. But when you think about the discipline of children, like right here, right now, what does that look like for you as a fellow educator?
I know I wanted to share, I was thinking as you were talking, I had a student last year who was struggling with behavior. It took a long time to build a trusting relationship with the mom, and I actually didn't learn until the end of the school year, the end of quarantine, that there was a trauma that happened in 3rd grade. So in 4th grade, he was sent out of the classroom almost all year long. Very struggling student, very far behind academically, and I'm sure that's where a lot of behaviors came from. But when I started the PST process and reached out for help, the advice to me was, you have to document, you need to write referrals for everything. So I think there's a problem in that foundation when a teacher is reaching to help. What that is not the advice we need to give. That is not the route we need to go, because and I got so desperate at one point to get somebody in the classroom to help this child that I did start writing referrals, but it made no difference. It wasn't improving for him. Nobody else was coming. So I worked on building a relationship with mom, and that was what made the difference and where we started to see a turnaround. But until that happened, and she even wanted him in my class again next year, because, and her words were, because I feel comfortable with you and you know where we're at, I feel like we can grow together. So I learned a big lesson after 17 years in education just last year. But I do think when we're reaching out for help, that was the advice I received last year. We need to document, he needs these services, please. He didn't need services. He just needed a counselor. He needed somebody to come in and watch him and to reteach behaviors while they're happening in the classroom. So I think that is one thing I see as a teacher in the classroom now, changing that mindset when we're talking about, right, starting kids on the problem solving team and working through finding their needs and how we can help our students. Because our goal is not to label the student through that process. Our goal is to identify where the student's needs are and to help them make improvements.
Mm. Well said.
Presley?
Yes, just to piggyback, I remember working at New Smyrna High School in the dean's office, and I learned a valuable lesson. When students came to the dean's office, it was my point to have meaningful conversation with those students, or every student, to figure out the why. Why is this happening? And my superior at the time, she began to get kind of, jealous, because the kids wanted to come see me, even though they were going to get the same consequence that she was going to give them. But knowing that I would sit down and actually have a conversation with them to figure out what is going on, what happened this weekend, what's going on at home. And I would let them know, what the consequence is going to be. But what are we going to do moving forward? How can we change this? What are we going to do different the next time we're in these situations? And this year, we're going to implement something different at Seabreeze. Students who are in school suspension, that 7th period of the day, we're going to send a guidance counselor in school suspension to have almost like a therapy session with those students, even though they're supposed to be working. But we think it'd be more meaningful for a counselor to go in to have type of a small group therapy session with those students. So we'll see what happens this school year. Mr. Henry, don't steal that.
I really like that plan. I was about to say, are you writing that down, Mr. Henry?
I see the pen started moving. I like that. Teresa?
Yeah, I want to ask another question. Again, I'm learning, which is, I think, the whole point of these sessions, but it's probably been 4 years ago now. I was asked to come in and do a meditation workshop with the school counselors for Volusia County School. And I remember going in thinking I was going to be in front of 100 people. There were 32. That was it. And I remember being in complete shock that we had 32 counselors for what are there 60,000 kids in our school system? And they were so.
You might have just hit the high school counselors, though.
Right.
We do have more than that.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But even that's not enough.
No, there's not.
I mean, and I know there's a whole nother conversation happening later this week on criminal justice, but when we're talking about more counselors in the police department, maybe we need to start here.
Yeah, and it's not only just having the counselor there, it's the role that they play.
Yes.
Right? So yeah,
exactly.
We could have a whole nother discussion about that.
And we just lost our SEL teachers, TOAs also. So, and I
Yes.
know those two, Maddie Carter and Hannah Hendricks on our campus played a huge role with our students and building those relationships and helping work through behaviors and the why behind the behaviors. That is a huge loss for us in the public school system in Volusia County.
Thank you.
I have a statement and a question. Research shows that there's a correlation with students who, I'm going to say, disrupt classrooms or misbehave, and ones who do not their potentiality. Ones who can't read or write or do mathematics. My question is, what do we do? Because I heard you speak about the parents. Actually, several of you have. What do we do when the parents are trying to take care of the home? They're working. They don't have the time to actually sit and read with their babies. But then you get these students and they can't hold a pencil in kindergarten. They don't know their sight words. We know that there's a discrepancy between the number of words that they know and their counterparts. So what do we do with these students? Because I think these are the same students that we're talking about when they come in that way. They're the same ones who are in the office with disciplinary referrals. And then they're the same ones in the criminal justice system, and they end up in prison. And that's what they call, you know, school to prison, that pipeline. What do we do about those students, about those kids?
Yeah,
We know what we do.
yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I'm just thinking that's the $1 million question, right? We probably, if you asked us, what have we been doing? We could all tell you the gap and the bumps in the road of not properly addressing that, you know. And again, that goes into, you know, what happens with discipline at younger ages. You know, we have lots of conversation about your client that I had as a therapist that would get suspended every other week. Right. So there's other situations that if we're not addressing them, you know, holistically, and because it can't only be within the educational realm either, you know, although this conversation is heavy on that, there are missing pieces and links. So to hear Dahan say, hey, we're going to have the counselor in on 7th period, I got like excited. That's like a birthday gift all over again, right? So because we've added an additional element that says it can't be done or just be on one person's books for the day. Because we see what ends up happening.
Mm-hmm. That's high school. What about when they're entering? You think we need to implement the same strategy there in elementary school?
Well, I think, because like I'm sharing with you, the 5-year-old student that I had when I was a therapist in the community was getting suspended every week. I was getting so tired, I just showed up at the school. I said, there's something else that we have to, like, let's please put our minds together. Let's give the opportunity for like a quiet room or a breathing room, right? Or something just to take a break. Like there has to be another answer rather than what Josie mentioned. Let's just keep writing the referrals, or, oh, I don't like when he said hello. Like there has to be some better responses. And so again, I know it eventually falls in the power that be, but I think like with the faith organization representative and us all on this platform, being vocal about that. Someone mentioned the word, I think it was you, Lee, saying being bold, right? So we have to be bold. We have to be intentional. I wrote down, be bold, be transparent, and be intentional, right? And so just because it doesn't directly impact my child right now, right here, it impacts someone's child, right? And so what are we going to do about that? Are we having conversation with our school board members? Are we having conversation with our administrators on site? Not because it directly impacts me, right? But because it directly impact others, are we doing that? Because if not, what's going to happen is when we open the paper, those that we used to know would have been a part of that school prison pipeline, right? Because we had a direct obligation and we said, well, it's not my watch today, so I don't really have to handle that. I need to teach English, right? Or I'm the guidance counselor and I need to do the schedule changes, right? Because those are things that we're up against and we're given as our duties. But then there's that other piece, the human factor, that just says, let's do what's right for others.
Great.
I wanted to add one little thing too. I think, I'm sorry.
No, that's, yes.
Okay. I think in school, and when I learned about education, it was you start the year hard. You don't smile till December. You come in full force, you know, and I approach this so differently because I am immediately turning these students all off. My goal is I want them to fall in love with me. I want to build a relationship, because the second we have that bond, then we can make some movements. We can make some gains. And you're with me for the rest of your life now once you enter my classroom. So I think also on the college level, when we're talking about discipline and I haven't been in college in a long time, too long. But when we're talking about these factors also, we need to change that storyline, because for many years I came in like, you know, a drill sergeant, and I didn't smile, and it wasn't authentic to me. So I think every day I tell every first year, I look them in the eyes and say, I have thought of you all summer long. I have said your name 100 times. You are meant to be in my life. And instantly I have relationships. Instantly I am building trust. I'm vulnerable. I share my learning experience and how difficult it was. So I think changing that storyline on the college level with future teachers also, because I know that, I don't know if it's still like that, but it was come out tough, stern, and that right away you have a whole, you're batting 1,000.
You know, and oftentimes we hear, I was sharing with Josie and Mayor Henry earlier today, I've been on a call every hour since 8 o'clock, but one of the calls was wrapped around classroom management, right? And when we hear classroom management, automatically we think discipline, right? So we're going to have to make sure that child stays in line. That is classroom management, right? And so Josie just on the college level, when we have the folks coming in through their internship programs, you know, we have to change the narrative of what classroom management really means. It's not negative, right? It doesn't have to be. It is managing our classroom in such a way so that we are building rapport, right? So that we do have relationships in our classroom, which actually leads to question 3. And this is the last question that we have for today's discussion. It is, how does equity play a role in how students interact with one another? And I think, Maggie, you approached this, or Lee, right? Approached this a little early on. What do we do when the students are not kind to each other? What am I to do, right? I think it was Maggie, was it you who mentioned that earlier? It was Lee. Lee, you mentioned that earlier. So what are we to do? So that's the question. The last question that we have actually for today's session is, how does equity play a role in how students interact with one another? And what's our role within that?
I'll just jump in if that's okay.
Yes,
The structure of our school in alternative ed is different from others because we're so small. Our class sizes max out at 15, and it's usually more like 7 or 8 kids in a class.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we get to know the students really well. The students get to know one another really well. We get to know their families. And, you know, it's similar to what Josie was talking about building relationships and, you know, not having that huge school that's just kind of like an assembly line where you're just pushing the kids through and you don't really get to learn kids' likes and dislikes or know them very well. So, you know, they have no problem disrespecting their teacher or getting thrown out, and you have no problem doing it because you don't know them anyway. So, you know, a lot of it, I think, too, is the same, you know, the same relationship building that teachers have to do with students, we have to encourage for students to do with one another. And another cool thing about our school is that we have kids come from all over the east side of Volusia County from different schools who would not know each other otherwise, different neighborhoods, different cities. And, you know, they really do a beautiful job getting to know each other. And, you know, if they're a little standoffish or if they, you know, they do have presumptions about one another, you know, the teachers are very open to encouraging them, asking questions and getting to know one another. So, you know, it's that same like community vibe that we have to have in schools more so than, you know, the structure of punishment and, you know, like you say, standing in line, keep them in line, keep them quiet, keep them still, and punish them when they're not. Well, they're children, so, you know, they have to develop social skills too. God, we know that. So I would say teach social skills, encourage every moment that comes up as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there was a time that the focus was on character traits, right? And everyone taught certain things within their classroom, and the students left with identifying what being kind actually is. And you didn't stop it in elementary school. It was further discussion when you went to middle and high. And so a lot of those things we pulled away and we replaced them with standards, but I'll be talking all day about that.
Yes.
So So any other comments or suggestions in that area, or further discussion? Because I do believe this is key. And I do believe that when you set that platform, because one, it starts with you, right, as an individual of what that looks like. But it could have even started with how the students came to you before you got there, right? I always remember the first day of school trying to predict how individuals were going to walk in and how I would be ready for them, right? And just being ready to take on whatever was going to take place that day. And also be ready to have grace, right? I like to walk around with grace. So also giving students the opportunity to have grace when things don't work out the first time, because as you mentioned, Maggie, they are kids, right?
I think it's, oops, go ahead.
I think we were on to it. Volusia County Schools, we were doing SEL, we were promoting it. We were really getting the work done. And now I see it's not in our schedule for next year. We lost our TOAs. So it's like we finally were making that move. Everybody was on board. We had to force the hand, you know, come on, mandate it. But we were doing the work. And I think, you know, that's one thing I'm really disheartened about that we're walking back on. So
yeah, and so maybe that's the area we be bold, where we become bold and actually have further conversation. Mayor Henry?
I think as in society, we're talking about reallocating funds in different pockets of social service, and schools are certainly a form of social service. We have to remember that we really do need to allocate funding for schools to address those soft skills that our students do not get enough practice in. And Dr. Cameron alluded to the issue of standards. We've flooded our curriculum with so much that we don't leave enough time in the school day for students to be properly socialized and to learn those soft skills and learn how to practice those soft skills. We hardly have time for students to learn how to do presentations. I mean, I can recall when I was a teacher that I had lots of time for students to get up and present to one another and to reflect on what their colleagues were presenting and to listen to one another and show the skill of being able to listen and be a good audience. There's so many of those sorts of things that we've lost. We have to find a way to re-invoke them in the curriculum.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's Karen Delisle again. I remember going and talking with the gentleman who's the leader of, Literacy Council. And so he said something that we almost laughed out loud. I mean, it was a bunch of white people. And he said, I said, how does it happen that a child gets to be 16 and cannot read? And he said, because education isn't valued in the home. And like I said, we all almost laughed, that seems so bizarre. But then a teacher mentioned at one of our meetings that what was that parent's experience in school, that they're not valuing school for their child? How were they treated in school? And did it get them anywhere to be good in school? Or it didn't matter in their life. It doesn't matter that I, tried and worked hard in school and I'm still, waitress, or I'm still, a maid at a hotel. And so that was eye-opening for me. So that might be a dimension to look at too. Mm-hmm. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other comments or further discussion in this area on students and how they treat each other?
I just wanted to add that I think that we probably need to be prepared for people who do not want equity to be bolder as well, because I see that. I see people speaking out in a way that I feel like 10 years ago I would never have seen.
You would never.
So I think that's that counter boldness, is to just be prepared. I just feel like I'm prepared for people trying to slow down the momentum of the current movement, and to start rehearsing in my mind how I'm going to get in the way of that, or educate that person, or I don't know. I just, lots of thoughts going on in my mind. It's so nice to take a break from talking about COVID-19, which is obviously like a problem that I believe that scientists will get together and solve, and we will get a vaccine and we will move on. But this issue of equity is 10 times more complicated and is the long haul. So I appreciate just having the opportunity to talk about it and not COVID-19 for a few minutes, which is probably where some of those funds are being diverted, is to physical safety, which is just across the board. So I just wanted to say that it feels good to talk with like-minded people about the way things are going, but it's always in my mind that we have to toughen up too, that boldness will come from a few different directions and not all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
And that will be, kids will be open about that.
I always feel if I'm consistent in my behavior, then that's all I can be responsible for.
Right.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Thank you. So if we don't have any other questions or comments, I know Mayor Henry wanted to kind of move us to next steps. And so if everyone feels comfortable in that, I believe we'll move there.
Okay.
I can't, everyone's so hard for me to tell.
I'll just ask Abby, did you, can you speak now? No, you're still muted.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's weird.
Yeah.
And it says it's unmuted.
It says it's unmuted on our side. Did you click the mute button? Put your mouse on it and click it. Okay, sorry. All right.
Did she click?
Nothing.
We'll get it worked out. Okay, again, I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been a robust and positive discussion of folks who are largely in the field of education. Moving on in our next steps, on the week of the 20th, I will get with the two facilitators and we will ask the two of them if, you know, which day works for them during that week and which time. It will either be a 10 o'clock session or a 2 o'clock session on one of the 4 days during the week, because we want to make sure that each facilitator from the 5 different groups can choose a time that really resonates for them. And so we will move to the next step, and the next step will be for all of us. Come back thinking about where you are as a professional, and if you have a classroom or if you're a school leader, what will you do in your environment to push the needle on equity? That's number one. What will you do in your environment over what you have purview or control over? Now, some people can, you know, we're going to invite others. There will be others that we will invite, because a part of this, during our last session, you know, Embry-Riddle's president was a part of the session, and so was Daytona State and other principals, assistant principals. It doesn't matter, but the part of the conversation is what you control. How will you move the needle forward? Second thing we want everyone to come away with is, and the reason I was writing that down was Mr. Presley was giving us a best practice or a practice that they plan to use. And in order for us to be successful, that's what we need. We need to know what works or what might work. We need ideas. Iron sharpens iron, and we need to share best practices. So I want to challenge all of us, if you don't have one, research one. But come back to this group, and this is not just K-12, because we want to be able to send and have information that we can pass on to colleges. There may be ways that you have to push this equity initiative in your class so that your students, they ask all the right questions today. They really did. They asked, how do we discipline them? How do the students interface with one another, essentially, as it relates to equity? And we want to teach our students this concept. We want them to understand it. It is not above their cognitive ability. I don't care how young they are. They know what fairness looks like, and they want to experience it. And by and large, they want their colleagues to experience it. But we have to teach them how to appropriate it. Because if they can appropriate it, then it becomes something that permeates your classroom, your learning environment. So we want you to come back next session thinking about best practices that you can share, thinking about how you implement this, thinking about, and we will get together, the facilitators and myself, and we'll raise a series of questions outside of those that I have created, and we will share them with you. The other thing I want to apprise you of is that this is a process that is organic. It has to take a life of its own. I cannot force equity or an initiative down the community's throat. It will only be as successful as we embrace. If we embrace, then we will be successful. So we need to invite others so that we become a movement throughout the community and throughout our area of education. This is our area that most of us are passionate about. So how do we make this issue of equity sweep through from college to pre-K? So again, I would like to express my sincere appreciation. We will be sending out emails because I want everyone involved. We see how all of this is interrelated. And many of the people who are on this call are from other groups, or at least they're committed to other groups. But they're here because they see that all of this is interrelated and interconnected, and we have to work together. We will be sending out emails with correspondence, things for folks to read. Josie is doing a book club with colleagues in education. I want to make sure that I share that with everyone so that if you want to read a book with her and join her book club, Dr. Hall and Miss Rand are doing a book study of sorts that they're doing as a group surrounding this very topic. Because the issue is the more that we learn, and we don't learn by preaching, we learn by sharing our experiences and reading and convening and conversing about this topic and having the hard conversations. So we're going to share more information. You process what you can, and I encourage you all to stay engaged because engagement is what will make the difference. Thank you, and we will see you during the week of the 20th, and we will get out as quickly as possible a schedule by the end of the week.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
everyone.
Hey,
real quick.
Deputy Police Chief. Yes, sir.
Hey, I apologize. I've been here the whole time, but I also couldn't figure out the audio. So I too appreciate the discussion. I've been here the whole time, and obviously you guys know we have the school resource officers. We're in every school in the city. So we're wrapping up now. So I don't really want to get into it right now, but since we're going to be meeting again, I just want you all to kind of think and let me know in further discussion what we can do from a school resource officer standpoint to better assist you throughout the school year, because obviously we're there, but the message we've always sent to the school resource officer is we don't want them to be the first line of defense. We want it to be the teachers, the school administrators, and then if it's something that they can't handle, be it, violent tendencies or whatever the case may be, then obviously we will step in. But we don't want to be the first line of defense simply because a lot of these kids that exhibit the violent behavior that we discussed, they see us enough in their home life. So that's really not the goal when we're on the campus. And just another thing, I just commend each and every one of you for what you do as educators, because you guys have an extremely hard job. But I definitely want to engage in the future from a school resource officer standpoint, just so I can hear from you all and you all can let me know what you need from us and how we can be of better assistance as we move forward.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you,
Thank
Deputy.
you. Thank
Okay,
you so much.
be in touch. Everybody have a good night.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.